okay? Okay. We're back in regular session. Mr. Harris? This is an action item, consideration to extend exclusive negotiating agreement with GBHD LLC.
We were discussing the first item on executive session, whether there needed to be a report out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because I think we got the consensus from the agency. to
Okay.
proceed, so.
Okay,
All right, a little housekeeping.
okay.
So if I may, Madam Chair, members of the board, the item before you this evening is consideration to extend an exclusive negotiating agreement, known as an E&A, with GBHD LLC. On February 20th of this past year, the board authorized the chair to enter into an E&A with GBHD for the purposes of developing a hotel and property generally located at Union and First Streets in the downtown area. This initial period was good for 120 days, and the effective date of the agreement. And on June 19th, the board approved a 120-day extension of the E&A, and that expires on October 24th, next week. We have in your packet a request from the GBHD attorney that is requesting an extension of the E&A at this time. We also, in your agenda packet, you do have a copy of that E&A, and with that on the last page, Exhibit A, it details the funds that are being requested from the agency, approximately $1 million, which includes the transference of the agency-owned parking lot at the corner of First and 4th Street. A value of $103 has been assigned to that per the exhibit. That property does not have a recent appraisal on it, so I cannot give you what its current market value is. The property is currently being used as a parking lot for the tenants and residents of the Commodore Hotel, Commodore 2, which is across the street from City Hall. If this were to go forward, the agency would need to find a substitute site for parking for those residents and tenants. Included within the agreement for that property owner is that property or parking must be provided within, I think it's 600 or 660 feet of the Commodore. The city does own property on 4th between Union and Court. It's commonly known as the state building property. There is available parking on that site. So we have looked at that as a receiver's site for parking. In the discussion part of the agenda report, it gives some background on what's been occurring since the E&A was entered into. The staff, through our attorney and GBHD has completed a confidentiality and non-circumvention agreement. That was done at the beginning of September. And then we'd also retained Leland Consulting Group to review certain documents and, if authorized by the board, to prepare an economic and fiscal impact analysis of the hotel proposal. This would be a similar analysis that was done for the Tokala Properties mixed-use project where the Tony's building is currently situated. The report goes into the status of Leland's work and the cost to date on that. Phase 1 of their work, the agreement was $12,370. It's noted in the report because of some issues with deadlines and the completeness or incompleteness of the materials submitted. Leland could not perform their work. Phase 1 did authorize an additional $1,500, which we were calling Phase 1.1, that finished their work up as it is to date. Since they were unable to complete their Phase 1 work, they did submit a second scope of work, which we called Phase 1B, with a cost of $11,800. And as originally scoped, their economic analysis would have been a cost of $11,750. So if the agency the agency authorizes all of these different phases of Leland's work, it would be just under $37,000 in agency's funds to review these various documents. The agenda report also has an excerpt from a September 7th email that I sent to Michael Leash and GBHD regarding the status of Leland's work, and the work was suspended at that time. I reported it out to the board. I also offered up two options for moving forward with this project at that time. One, that the project could go forward through the city's entitlement process without agency assistance, or two, the second option would for GBHD to enter into a reimbursement agreement with the agency for the remainder of Leland's work. As noted in the report at that time, I believe that the proposal was premature, requesting agency financing, and that's staff's opinion today as well. It has not changed. And I have yet to receive a response from GBHD on the two options I presented in my September 7th email. So therefore, at this particular time, staff's recommendation is moved to decline an extension of the ENA between Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBH. There are also other alternatives for the board as well, and the staff's recommendations. That concludes the staff presentation. If you have any questions or comments.
Any comments from the board?
I have a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Sir Harris, would the fourth board alternative of approving the extension with the exclusive of the ENA, provided that there was a reimbursement agreement? You said that you extended that offer in your letter. You haven't heard back, but if would that be another appropriate board alternative?
Yes, if the I believe so. If the extension was conditioned upon entering into that reimbursement agreement, so Leland could complete their work. As you may remember, also at the very beginning, that Phase 2 of Leland's work, the actual economic fiscal impact analysis, was to have been completed, I believe, in June. And at that time, on that presentation and acceptance by the board, it would have been the board's decision then to authorize that second phase.
And maybe as an additional, like, perhaps, not, yeah, so extending that to those contingent upon also for them to pay for that Phase 2 analysis at this point.
Yes, that would be the recommendation.
So, I believe that GBHD should be given a chance to confirm if the information that we are using to make this decision is accurate. I still object to the fact that they were not allowed into the executive session to hear what was being said about them that we are using to make our decision by. And I believe that they are not being treated the same as other developers such as Tokala, based on the fact that Tokala's DDA doesn't even ask for some of the information they are being asked for in their ENA until after when they sign their DDA.
Anyone else?
I would concur that this presentation was premature based on the lack of evidence of funding. And again, urban renewal is not going anywhere. And I would encourage Mr. Leash to bring us back a proposal once all these items have been taken care of. And with that, I'll make a motion to decline an extension to the exclusive negotiating agreement between the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD LLC.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to move to decline the extension to the exclusive negotiating, the ENA, between the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD LLC. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Okay, that passed. Next item on the agenda is staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next regularly scheduled meeting.
As a point of order, there was a comment during the public opportunity to speak that we would have an opportunity to address those things. You cut us off from the public opportunity because you said we could talk during the agenda items, and you now robbed us of that opportunity.
Would you please identify
My
yourself?
name is
and your-
Bradley Timmons, attorney for GBHD.
Okay,
And your address, sir?
My address is 3591 Clint Drive, Suite 220.
Thank you.
You effectively silenced us and then said you're gonna go into a meeting, you decided this in executive session, and then when we came out and you said we could have an opportunity to talk, and this, I think, are you the one that got up? Somebody got up to talk, and you said, no, you're gonna have an opportunity to talk during the agenda item. That was a lie.
so,
And we did indicate that, I think,
yes,
Yeah,
we did.
I think we did.
Yes, we did.
get up to speak, that there was going to be an agenda item later, and certainly if you want to take some
There's
testimony
oversight.
now, you could do that.
You've already voted, so you've robbed us of that opportunity.
So can we have another motion?
I think your motion may be to reconsider at this
Right.
time.
Yeah,
But the only
Consider
person that can
your
move
vote.
that is someone said no.
I'll make a motion that we reconsider.
a second.
It's a
Okay.
violation of Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm sorry, my motion was a,
It's a violation of Robert's Rules of Order.
so only the person you're saying who made the motion?
No, only the person who said no if they're willing to change their vote, which I'm not.
So saying you need to make that motion?
Yeah, you can look it up if you'd like.
No, I don't, Ms. Curtis, we're just trying to understand what you're trying to say. So if you could help elaborate, that would be great.
And a little closer to the
Yeah.
mic because I can't,
Yeah,
and the words are dropping out.
The only person who can make a motion is the person who voted the opposite way.
Okay.
And if they're going to change their vote.
Mr. Parker?
I think it may be, but obviously, we want to maybe try to find some way here to maybe give Mr. Timmons, I guess, and his client a chance to address the body. We don't want to be perceived as
And,
I
and,
will-
not that
uh,
discussion or.
I will make a
Madam Chair?
motion.
oh, okay, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we allow people who came to speak about this to speak now. And if the board would like to reconsider, then we'll talk at that time about opening it back up again.
And, Madam Chair, just to Mr. Timmons' point, you said that we made our decision in executive session. I can say for myself, I didn't make my decision until after we came out of executive session and I heard further information from staff, thought about it, and then made my decision.
Sure.
I quote, the motion to reconsider may be made only by a member who voted on the prevailing side in the original motion.
Sorry. Thank you for looking up.
These are what you tried to require.
I'm Roger Dibbles, 1617 Oregon Street, representing George Transportation,
Yeah.
1617,
Oregon Street.
thank you.
Okay, so anyone else that can,
So I'll make the motion that we reconsider.
is there a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to reconsider the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So now, public comment?
Good evening. As I stated before, I'm Bradley Timmons. I represent Mr. Leash and GBHD. I demonstrated some passion and advocacy, but I also appreciate your service tonight. I know you all serve on other boards, and you're here because of those, and it's a lot of work, and I do appreciate your service as a member of this community. I'm here to request approval of the 120-day extension. And I will tell you that I feel hamstrung here because apparently there was a lot of, as Councilor Long Curtis stated, there was discussion in executive session, and I don't know what the issues are. I don't know what was presented. I don't know what was said about my client. And I can only speculate. I'm arguing against the unknown. But I would like to do the best I can and address those issues. This extension was contemplated in the exclusive negotiating agreement. It should be granted as a matter of course. Instead, Mr. Harris got into the details of the proposal, and rather than looking at just the procedural matter of going forward, allowing additional time that was contemplated. We understand that Mr. Harris opposes the request, and we are surprised, we're disappointed, we're frustrated, and we're somewhat stunned about it. I'm going to tell you why. We are operating under an ENA to negotiate a memorandum of understanding for the construction of a $25.6 million project. That's the size of a project that the city hasn't seen, and it's significant. This agency hasn't seen. As I've explained before, Mr. Leash is putting together many moving parts of a puzzle. Property, which is under contract and control, an operator, which we have a very well respected, reputable operator, architect, a contractor, primary lenders, subordinate lenders, investors. The concept of the MOU should be to lay out the conditions whereby the agency will participate. We are operating, like I said, under an ENA to negotiate a memorandum of understanding. Mr. Harris and Mr. Parker have not produced an MOU in any form, any criteria, any outline, any document to negotiate on. The MOU should provide Mr. Leash with assurance that if he obtains lending and gets investors and continues to demonstrate financial success and continues to demonstrate the return to the taxpayers, then he can proceed. Mr. Leash needs this MOU in order to proceed further to attract investors and to solidify the project, to bring the pieces together. The agency will not be at risk. We are not asking that the property be conveyed at this time or encumbered at this time, or that the funds be expended, the $1 million be expended, but we're asking that, hey, in good faith, this is what we need as a part of the pieces of our puzzle to go forward to all of the other players in this project. And we're simply asking for an MOU that has conditions, that says, if we get these things done, we know we're gonna get that, we're gonna be able to have that parking lot included. But if we don't show that we've met those criteria, then the agency will have no obligation to proceed and encumber it and to contribute. The MOU can state all of this, and unless certain milestones are reached, as I've discussed, then the agency will have no risk. These conditions can be built into the MOU. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're asking for. Rather than negotiating an MOU, we have been participating in a frustrating process of demonstrating to Leland that our pieces are together. We told you at the very beginning of this process that our pieces are not together, and that we need an MOU to bring the pieces together. Now, with respect to timeliness, I strongly object to Mr. Harris's statements and summaries, as they are not accurate.
What's not accurate?
Issues with deadlines, completeness, and incompleteness of work. We submitted a confidentiality agreement to Mr. Parker on June 1st. We got a draft back 49 days later. In sum, from June 1st, 2018 until it was completed on September 5th, 2018, it sat in the agency's lap for 61 days. And we were here in a previous meeting in July saying and Mr. Leland was here, and they came with a long list of documents that they wanted us to provide, and we said, and this was in the middle of July, we said, well, on June 1st, we gave a draft of a confidentiality agreement, and until that's signed, we're not going to produce the documents. That was the understanding. And so we encouraged you not to proceed with making any determinations based upon their report because it was premature. Of course they didn't have the documents. We told them we had the documents, but we're not going to provide them to you until we have the confidentiality agreement in place. And the agency sat on them for 61 days. Prior to it being signed, there was a phone conference between agency and Kristen Campbell from my office was involved, and Mr. Leash was involved, and that was August 10th. We're still waiting for the agreement to be signed. In fact, there was a 16-day period at that point. We're still waiting for a response from the agency. Notwithstanding the fact that the confidentiality agreement had not been signed, Mr. Leash began providing documents, uploading them to a drive, a shared drive, Dropbox. And began doing that August 21st, and continued to do that up until September 7th. There was a phone conversation where there was an agreement about here's the milestones, here's how Mr. Leash is going to provide the documents and when he's going to do them by. And Mr. Parker and Mr. Harris were going to do a memorandum of that agreement. That was never produced. Nevertheless, Mr. Leash continues to provide the documents. And he's sending email messages to the group saying, I've now uploaded this, I've uploaded this, I've done this, I've done this. I'm sitting in my office on September 7th, and I about fell out of my chair, and I get a copy of a letter from Mr. Harris stating that he's terminating Leland's work, he's suspending the project because we haven't met our deadlines. Mr. Harris didn't pick up the phone and say, hey, your email says I'm getting all these documents, and Leland says they can't find them. Where are they? Well, apparently, they had a technological problem. They couldn't see them. They were there. We didn't really quite know what to do, but we didn't get a phone call. We didn't get any kind of professional courtesy to say, hey, there's a problem here. What's going on? So I sent a letter on the 14th to Mr. Parker outlining that, objecting, saying, no, we've provided these documents, and there's email attachments to my letter demonstrating some of the communications that were made. And I have a copy of my letter dated September 14th I'd like to share with you. And you can tell by my letter that I'm a little bit worked up.
Mr. Timmons, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Does Mr. Leash have a letter of funding commitment from Live Oak and Premier Capital?
He has a letter of interest. And until he has an MOU, he's not going to get it's like going to a bank without an earnest money agreement. He has as much as he can get from them. And we have representatives from the GB3 program that market that, they can tell you what they're willing to commit to at this point.
Which program is that?
That's the EB5 program. I said 3, it's late. So you don't go to your lender and say, hey, give me a loan if you don't have an earnest money agreement. You don't go to your Live Oak and say, give me an absolute loan commitment that I can take without a memorandum of understanding. But we have letters from them saying, we've been there, we're committed to this project, and Mr. Leash can tell you a little bit more about the details of that. But an absolute commitment from that, I saw that in Mr. Harris's letters, saying he's concerned about that. And I'm saying that is not fair to us, because we don't have, there's some moving parts, we don't have the memorandum of understanding to take to Live Oak to get that. And it's shocking to me that that is his criteria. Now, for them to, if we want to proceed and we want to get a memorandum of understanding in place, we can take and get that commitment. And the agency won't be at risk until that commitment is in place. That's the part where you don't have risk. That's one of the conditions of our memorandum of understanding is, subject to getting this loan, subject to you showing us that this is successful, then you can have this property and we'll make these commitments. But we're not asking you to blindly make those commitments without us demonstrating that to you. But we need this memorandum of understanding. That's what we thought we were going to be proceeding towards.
How much of a commitment or a loan from Live Oak? What's the dollar amount? What's being asked?
$13.75 million.
Okay, and they want an MOU that says $1 million from Urban Renewal Agency.
They want an MOU saying that we have a viable project that we can proceed with. We need parking. We need that arrangement done. We have certain conditions, and that's a key component to this project. So yes.
And the cost of appraising that lot and the investment that is going to be required to make that MOU happen, is that something that GBHD is willing to take on? I mean, so there's associated costs with preparing this and getting us to this point, of which we spent about $12,000 so far. And so, you know, you might have heard I said if there's a reimbursement agreement for future work, it's a drop in the $25 million bucket for this project of this size, but it's a lot of money for our little agency to be expending.
Well, it's a great question, and I appreciate it. And I think that's something that the MOU could absolutely take care of and address. So I think that needs to be negotiated. And I don't know the answer. I don't have permission from my client to say absolutely we're going to commit to that number, but that would be something that we anticipated would be taken care of as the MOU. We recognize that there are those types of things that have to happen.
Well, and actually that figure is roughly 25,000, is it not?
For the additional wheeling work?
For the work that's already been completed, phase 1.
There was going to be a phase 2 that he was adding on to that.
Right. So question, if there were to be some sort of agreement that were to reimburse and to tie up the land, would that MOU then work? So that once all the funding, you could then come back to the agency to try to get us to commit to the $1 million? So that we're not on hook and can't do other projects until that time? I'm just throwing out possibilities.
And I'm trying to understand it, and I appreciate that. And I think that an MOU could address that and do, and those are part of what we would contemplate. This is it's like an earnest money agreement. There's going to be things that's going to go out, and you're saying, well, we want to have some flexibility here until you reach certain milestones. We want to have some flexibilities, and I think stuff like that can be built into it. We would want some protections that give us an opportunity, like almost a right of first refusal, but not really that. But along those lines, we don't want to go so far down and then be shocked that, oh, that money's not there.
Sure.
And that's, to Tanner's point, I mean, I think that, you know, the agency wants to be fair. You say that there's no risk to the agency, but there are other risks. There's risks of missing out on other viable projects because we've committed the property and these funds to this project. And so when we're weighing the viability of projects and the agency doesn't have the money to fund every project perhaps that comes before us. And so to commit the funds to this project, the risk is that we lose out on other projects in that time. So it is not completely risk-free.
And I was an economics major, and all I can remember is opportunity cost. That's about the one thing I can remember from a long time ago, and that's what you're talking about. But that's what was contemplated by this agreement, and we have 120-day built into it, and we are making a lot of progress, and we think that was contemplated by the original ENA, and the delays are not Mr. Leish's fault, and I strongly disagree with that notion that he should now be penalized for that. And we are looking at we would like to have a memorandum of understanding and proceed with that and have some landmarks and put in place. We need to, we're not asking that it be out there forever, but have a memorandum of understanding that, hey, now that we have this, we can get better commitments. We can bring these pieces together and have a timeline for that's acceptable to you, that hedges those bets, that eliminates, that reduces that risk. But we did contemplate the 120-day extension.
Mr. Timmons, did you say that there's a representative from the EB5 here tonight?
That's correct. From a agency that works with EB5 loans.
Because it was our understanding that that program goes away, I believe, December 7th.
I'm going to let you talk to them. They're here and they'd be happy. I don't know that.
That'd be great. Love to
Okay.
hear from them.
I want to just finish with a few comments if I can. I know I've been up here a long time and I apologize for that and thank you for your patience. We had I sent this letter on September 14th. I think that's where I left off and I was then asking questions. And in response, we were informed that the project was back on track, that Leland had been re-engaged to continue. We thought that was great. At this point, another 14 days has gone by. And we got a letter on September 28th from Leland, which is essentially a punch list, and asking for us to have a conference call on October 2nd to go over that list. And we thought, great. And you're always going to have a punch list because they want to drill deeper. You give them certain stuff and it raises questions. So they're saying, let's go deeper with this. And that was the spirit of that phone conference. I was on it. Ms. Campbell was on it. Mr. Leash was on it. Mr. Harris was on it. And Wally Hobson from Leland was on it. And he indicated that that he had been this project had been handed off to him, and he was asking for documents such as a 10-year pro forma that he said that didn't exist, that we hadn't provided to him. And Mr. Leash pointed out to him, no, it's there, and he couldn't find it. He stumbled over it, and finally, eventually, he got to it and found it. And apparently, they were also under the impression that we had not yet secured an agreement with the operator of a nearby restaurant and owner of that. And although that agreement had been uploaded and sent to him. And I don't know what's going on at Leland, and I don't know how they could spend that much money on at this stage. I'm disappointed that they've already spent all their budgeted money. So we had that phone conference on October 2nd, and we discussed additional documents that they wanted us to provide, including refreshed and updated letters from the lender, from a builder, from an architect, from operator, refined numbers, budgets, spreadsheets galore, and these documents in a flurry were developed, obtained from these third parties, provided to Mr. Leash. Mr. Leash provided them to them. They were having problems seeing it on this Dropbox again, so eventually it turns into we're just emailing them to them. We provided all those documents. We said we'd provide them within 10 to 14 days, and we did so. And we feel it's a comprehensive and substantial and meaningful documents. But it appears to us, however, that Mr. Harris or Leland or had already made up their mind, and although we were continuing to provide documents, we feel that this, providing these additional documents was just sort of a song and dance they want us to go through, was kind of just for make us feel good that we could provide them to them, because they weren't really acknowledged that we had provided them, and they were continuing to ask for documents that we'd already provided. On October 4th, Mr. Harris asked for an additional document outlining $800,000 of expenses that Mr. Leash has incurred. And October 6th, Mr. Leash's CPA provided that information. And it demonstrates that we're still actively providing documents, they're actively asking for them, and we're doing so in a timely manner. So this is why we're
Can I jump in
surprised.
there? About that $800,000 number. So the details of that, are you referring to the $800,000 listed as equity for this project?
That's a component of that.
It's a component of that. And of that $800,000 equity, what portion of that is Mr. Leash's consulting fee?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Me taking a fee myself?
Or what, is any of that $800,000 listed as equity? Can you break down the details of that $800,000 listed as equity in this proposal for us?
Yeah, I have a breakdown of that.
Excellent.
That was provided on the 6th. It's probably broken out into about 15 different categories of different expenses that I've taken to date. So, yeah, we can talk to that.
Okay, I just, when you say expenses, are those actual, so it's, it's equity for this project, I mean, are some of those expenses your work to this date?
No,
No.
unfortunately, I'm the unpaid, I'm the only one that's not getting paid.
Okay, I just, so,
Only got.
do you have it, is it something,
Material, or
Well-
hit the material at the top.
First of all, it's something that's been produced
Materials.
under the confidentiality arrangement, and we're in a
okay,
public meeting.
fair enough. That's why I
Um,
asked if he would share it or could share
And
it.
I think his statement is, no, he has not received payment. That doesn't include that, it's outside parties. Well, for the foregoing
Do you have
reasons,
much more to say, Mr. Timmons? Do you have much more?
I was about ready to conclude. Thank you. So we're prepared to negotiate the MOU, and we respectfully request the agency agree to the 120-day extension and direct staff to negotiate an MOU with appropriate conditions and milestones to protect the public interest. And part of that negotiation would be considering some of the issues you raised, the expenses for appraisals and perhaps Leland's involvement and negotiation of terms that need to protect you and need to protect us. And so we can move on with this project. Thank you.
I have a question. So just as I'm still trying to somewhat get caught up, so the E&A is, I understand what that is, sorry. And there's already been 120-day extension. There's an allocation for 2, so this is a request of the second one for a total of 240 days. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So at that point, if the MOU is not completed within that 120 days, is that what next has to transpire within the next 120 days? Is that what would have to transpire?
Well, I think I was looking at the EA, I think it actually contemplates that at the end of that 240 days, it should be DDA at that point. It would be completed.
We call it an MOU
Right,
in
okay,
there.
the
but
DDA, right,
yeah.
okay, I understand. So at that point, if it's not completed within that time frame and all the extensions have been exhausted, then at that point, does this become dead?
I think at that time, probably it would be likely the agency would be in a position that appears.
I mean, there would be no agreement of any kind. I mean, I'm just asking, is that,
Well,
my understanding of the days and how everything would transpire with the,
I guess it's possible.
it's
we
just
don't-
my ignorance.
It's
is-
possible we don't reach an agreement and it's a negotiation.
Right, no, I understand.
And all that. We're we're wanting to do that.
Understand.
Yeah.
So if we look at the DDA or MOU, if we're using them kind of loosely as the same, if you look back at Toklas, there's all these milestones that have similar stuff to what we're doing here, which seems extremely strange in regards to the fact that we don't have, that we're doing pre-work, pre-DDA, pre-MOU work outside of having a DDA and not doing the work inside of, and not preparing and doing it with milestones inside of the DDA, which if you clearly look at the Tokla one, there's 20 of them in there with different dates and timelines and stuff. And all we're looking to do is enter into that.
I just wanted to make sure I understood, my question was to make sure I understood
Yeah.
the
so-
process as far as the days and everything.
So the next step is, we could,
Basically need 120 more days.
Mr. Leash, do you need him to come and it would,
Yeah,
I was going
yeah,
to
if you're going
suggest,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
Sorry.
didn't mean to take control, but Mr. Elliott asked about the American United EB5 folks, and they're from Portland, and I'd love give them an opportunity to come up and address some questions, and they can get home to their families in Portland.
Madam Chair, good evening. My name is Brian Cavanis. I'm General Counsel for American United Development.
Hold on, please. Spell your last name for me.
BRYANCAD is in Victor, ANESS. 10300 Southwest Greenberg, Suite 425, Portland, 97223. Just very briefly, American United Regional Center was the first regional center approved in the state of Oregon. And we are currently approved for projects and have projects active in the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, and we are negotiating projects also in the state of California. To date, we have placed approximately $100 million, ranging in anything from a assisted living facility to a large multiple-use project. We have been working diligently with the owners of this project. We have worked out a loan agreement that is mostly just pending your resolution of this project. We have prepared offering documents to present to investors. We're just about ready to go. We are very anxious to be a part of this project. And with that, I'd just like to open myself up to any questions that you might have.
I guess the one question that came up earlier is, Mr. Harris said something about the program ending on December 7th. Is that true, or what's the situation?
The project, the EB5 program has regular sunset dates. And
It's a federal program, right?
that is correct, ma'am, yes. It is a federal program administered by Department of Homeland Security through the USCIS agency. So that is correct.
Okay.
This program was originally adopted back in the late 90s, and it has a continuing sunset provision. And it is regularly goes through processes for reauthorization. This year, it has gone a little bit more slowly than anticipated. There are questions as to how to update the program to bring it 20 years forward. There are administrative rule changes that are being contemplated, and at the same time, around the omnibus process that we just went through in the U.S. Congress, there was legislation that was pending. At the time, the federal budget took priority over that. And so what happened was the program was reauthorized in September out through December. Vice Chair is correct that it will sunset again in December. The industry expectations are that we will have a similar reauthorization, and that after the elections, what we will see is either a significant rulemaking change or legislation that has been discussed and has been wandering through Congress since last summer. But we have every expectation that the program will continue, and we have a project up in Port Townsend, Washington that we are working on funding right now. It's just getting ready to go to market. So we have every expectation that this program will continue to be viable.
So the project in Port Townsend, you're hoping that you can get it funded before December 7th?
No, ma'am, it's going through funding right now.
So can I ask?
December
That's
7th.
correct.
No, we anticipate that it's going to keep continuing going through the process.
So let me ask a question, if you mind.
correct.
So you've said that you're backing this program, so contingent on us approving the $1 million funds to the project. Have you given a letter saying that, okay, the finance is approved based on this $1 million? That you are going, yes, you will fund the program?
We have every intention of funding, that's why we're here tonight.
But is there a document written out that you guys will do that?
No, we have not documented that. As I said, we have,
So there's uncertainty in what you're saying?
no, there's not uncertainty. We will fund this. As I said, we have spent considerable effort and resources preparing a loan document for this. We have spent considerable effort and resources preparing offering documents for investors to review.
So it wouldn't be a problem to put it in a written form, then a letter saying that contingent on this, so we would have something then to show that?
I believe that we could do something like close to that. Close to that, probably. Yeah.
I mean,
Similar to what the other funding institutions have been providing.
that's kind of what I think one of the big things we're looking for, so,
Sure.
okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, a letter of interest,
Absolutely.
but not a funding commitment? Short of a funding
Short
commitment?
of a funding commitment. We're in a similar position as a traditional banking lender is going to be, but yes, we can provide a statement along those lines.
So EB5 was originally Visa purchases, is that right?
I don't know that I would say Visa purchases, it is investments. In this instance, the minimum investment
From
would be
foreign agencies?
$500,000.
So what's the total amount that you guys are planning on funding for this project if it moves forward?
I believe it's in the neighborhood of 8.5 million is what we are advertising, 17 investors at $500,000 apiece.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments of this gentleman?
No.
Okay,
Madam Chair, thank you.
thank you.
Michael Leash, GBHD, thank you for Urban Renewal Agency for allowing us to be here tonight. I brought information in regards to some of the stuff that came up in the September 7th statement that was kind of incorrect in regards to Premier Capital and Live Oak Bank with respect to giving us what they call a deal sizing, which is similar to a term sheet. They actually use that and they go from their sizing deal all the way to potentially the loan documents. So they don't even issue a term sheet per se. They issue this sizing document, which I provided on September 6th to Brian with Leland. And unfortunately, it appears that we're still saying that that's missing, and I'm not quite clear why that is, because that was available in the Leland documents. And then
Do you have
also-
copies of that tonight?
Sure did.
Can we see those?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
You, sir?
So, so that was the, so this was the document that we provided, kind of, the goal was to clarify, hey, we're working with the lender flew out here in March, did a site visit, spent time with both Premier Capital as well as Live Oak. They went back and they wrote up the terms of the agreement and what this finance package would look like for us. And, did also, the whole deal included the construction as well as permanent financing. And in the last set of questions, Lewin asked, well, you don't have a construction loan. Well, it's actually an all-in-one loan, and they didn't see that within the sizing document. So that's why that second letter, dated October 10th, is with me kind of trying to clarify as Leland had kind of punch list of additional questions. So as part of that conference call, we tried to address as many of those as possible. The second portion of my concerns with the September 7th was the statement about the Hilton franchise. And I provided an email, again, I provided an email that's back when it was originally asked for, and put it in the Dropbox. And again, that question came up at maybe I'll pass this out too.
So, Mr. Leach, question on reading this. This is a letter from Premier Capital, kind of speaking for Live Oak Bank. There is no letter from Live Oak Bank on here. Do you have a letter from them?
So Live Oak does what's the siding deal, which is the second piece, and there's a couple more pages that go with that. Again, they don't do a term sheet, they do this sizing deal, and then they go through due diligence, and they go straight into underwriting. And that's what Premier Capital is trying to share with us, is that's the way they do this. So, as we talk about getting into the next set of MOU, DDA, that's where those milestones take place. In that 120-day where we come back with a fully underwritten deal. So back to the Hilton deal is, Hilton's got and on a given day, they got 1,000 franchises going on. They don't update their franchises. I just continue to work off the franchise that I have and keep them informed, and the date just continues to move out until there's some other deal that makes either one of us in that relationship. And that's why I tried to share that email, which is we continue to be in an agreement with them. They're not going to reissue a franchise agreement. They don't, because they got 1,000 on any given day. They're working on 1,000 franchises. So those were the two kind of burning questions I think that you probably talked about in the executive session, I'm going to guess, was probably I didn't have these two things. Well, quite frankly, I do. And I wish that we could move into next steps in terms of entering into some type of agreement, putting the milestones like you have with Okola, and we'll deliver in those agreements. I don't know how else to ask for that.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Leash. If, out of your proposal breakout, if you were to have the First and Court parking lot secured, could you then move forward?
Well, it addresses my parking need, that's for sure. That helps out, yes, that moves forward with, so what, that's an element that is incredibly important to the entire project. Because it's 80 parking spots versus 125. It makes a huge difference. I'm not quite sure I know the rest of it. You're going somewhere, so go ahead and.
Well, my thought was that this in my mind, still being premature, that if we were to give you some sort of exclusive right on that First and Court Street property, once you got all these moving pieces put together, that you could then come back to the agency, because again, the agency's not going anywhere.
That's an interesting way to put it. I mean, quite frankly, I think that, at some point in time, we want to finish the due diligence that Leland's doing, and that should be part of one of those milestones inside of the DDA, which is, hey, we're going to come back and we're going to finish this analysis just to make sure that everybody's got their ducks in a row and that it all matches up. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but we're trying to put the chicken before the egg, or however the saying goes, in regards to all this pre-work, and I can't do the pre-work because I don't have the rest of the pieces, which is an agreement with the city. And that portion of the capital stack is pretty important. And again, to Scott's point about committing money and having, is there other opportunities that are missed? I mean, I think that if we put milestones inside of a DD, I mean, there is no bigger opportunities than this. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know, short of in situ putting in a facility to build little drones downtown. So if we put in the right language in terms of the DDA, then I'll either perform and it'll sunset, or we'll get to a point in those things and everything gets solidified. I mean, that's really how it ends up. And the funds at that point in time that were set aside for us go back and it ends.
I think to Mr. Tanner's point, I'm kind of looking at the Premier Capital letter here, and also the gentleman spoke for EB5, and it basically, it's almost like letter of interest to participate, but it's not a full commitment yet. So if you had a letter of interest from the agency to participate in that same regard, would that give you enough to go and move forward? Because that's kind of what we're getting too, so I'm kind of curious on that as well.
Well, that's that chicken and egg thing. So again, I don't want the agent, I don't want the agency to spend any more money. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, let's put the pieces together inside of a DDA and have, solidify that agreement. And I'll either perform or I won't. I'll either get the rest of the equity in the bank and everybody will come together and we'll have all those pieces, or we won't.
What happens 120 days from now and you don't have it?
Let's not, but we're inside of a DDA. We're inside of this ENA, and we're not even moving beyond that. We don't have the milestones. We haven't even drafted what these milestones are. Like you have in your TOPLA one. You've got 6 or 8 pretty good substantial milestones, and I'm being asked to do them here as opposed to inside of the DDA without any commitment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Leach, I don't think that answered my question, though. I'm just kind of curious, because I keep hearing the chicken and egg, but I'm not sure if you know the answer to that. If you went to them, would that provide what you needed to move forward, is kind of what my question was.
Well, I mean, I think that those are like a DDA, that really is a DDA in terms of you are laying out this runway of things that I'll do, and I will, with the city's agreement, the agency's commitment, then we all perform. So I think it's the same thing.
Well, I'm not quite sure, because this isn't necessarily a commitment. This is showing that they have interest. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, so.
That's I'm just trying to kind of understand this a little bit better. Is the only reason I'm asking these things.
Right, so. I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it. Again, it gets back to structuring the milestones inside of an agreement. And again, Live Oak performs, once we know we got a parking lot, we got a live deal, and all the elements are there, then then Live Oak starts to do their underwriting, and then they would perform. And then they would have a true letter of commitment. And again, I don't know how that shows up exactly. I mean, they really call it a sizing sheet, and they go into underwriting documents. And I guess, I can get more information on that. But I mean, the way that they've explained it is they'll go right into loan documents, and then they start setting up a draw system.
And could you explain the sizing sheet a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's the back page of this where they've put together what the deal looks like. And then they've got our budget. There's 2 or 3 more pages with this. I didn't want to overload everybody with lots of paper. But they have a budget where our numbers, their numbers, and then a structure of the deal in terms of a couple of more things. And I may be missing a few things, but it's about a 4-page document.
So I just want to remind the board that in the last 2 years that I've been here, the procedure is we vote that we're going to do an exclusive negotiating agreement, and that agreement is the instructions to staff to go and put together the DDA and bring it back to us for approval. And inside the DDA are all of the conditions and deadlines. It's like we did with the Granada. If they don't meet their deadlines within it, we could get the building back. We're not done with them. The DDA is just the pieces of moving forward. It's not a guarantee that he's going to get everything. It's just what he needs. And sorry, this is what we do for everybody, except somehow this process got off track.
Oh, and I can point exactly where that was when Mr. Leach said that he needed us to commit to the parking lot and the funding to keep to going forward, and that if we weren't willing to do that, we shouldn't bother going through a DDA. And that was because without the parking lot, it was so key. We needed to decide on that as part of the ENA.
That didn't mean don't do a DDA. It meant if you can't put that inside the DDA with conditions, then the DDA is useless, because he needed the parking lot.
I mean, Mr. Leach, if we said we were still wanted to negotiate, we weren't sure about the parking lot, I asked you that question. Would you want to even move forward if it was a negotiating? And what we heard back was that was so fundamentally key that it needed to be that piece needed to be in there. And I think that's what's maybe made this process a little bit different, because it's asking the board in advance of a lot of information to commit to the lot and up to $1 million without that whole process going through.
All the information we're providing doesn't have anything to do with a parking lot. And it could be in the DDA saying if he doesn't do all these things, give us all this information, he can't have the parking lot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and Mr. Baker, I know what you're talking about. I remember those conversations, but those were, okay, if you're not going to do the parking lot, you're just not interested in doing that, let's not do this ENA.
Right.
But that does not in any way change what the DDA should do. The DDA would look the same whether that happened or not.
Mhm.
And we're contemplating a DDA that's going to have that parking lot. All those milestones are going to be there that look just like all the other projects.
But part of those agreement is if those milestones are met, then we need to provide the parking lot. There's not a lot of other decision points down that road.
Well, there are milestones for that. I mean, every project has its own levels of commitment. And we're not asking to do anything different other than make these milestones in a DDA, not in the EN.
But it's come out more than once tonight that parking lot is the cornerstone of this whole project.
Well, absolutely it is. And it's.
But you just got through saying that it's not the biggest part of the DDA.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, that's the way it came across.
That's not what I intended to say if it sounded like that. What I'm saying is, it's not a part of it. The ENA is simply, hey, let's start negotiating. And if you weren't going to include the parking lot, that's what I said, in the ENA, or if you had no intention of doing that, we would have been wasting our whole time. But you still should protect the public's interest and say, if you don't reach, once we get the DDA done, it has milestones in it that says if you don't do these things, if you don't perform, if you don't get your lending, if you don't get your investors, and you don't close this by a certain amount of time, you fail to perform, and you're not going to get the parking lot. And that's going to protect the public.
But we still have to make the decision that we want to give the parking lot and $1 million to this project. Because then we're saying, if you do your part, we'll give you $1 million. And if you perform your part, then we would be expected to give $1 million. And so part of that agreement is this board saying, do we want to give $1 million? Do we want to commit $1 million to this project? Part of that is saying, is this project viable? Now, there's a lot of ways to answer that question. And, and to get outside help, we hired a consultant. Sounds like that went a little sideways. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for this group to go back and do an executive session.
And Mr. Baker, I'd like to address that point, and I'm not meaning to beat it to death, but yes, you're saying we'll give you the $1 million in the parking lot, but we contemplate that the DDA is going to say, if we continue to demonstrate that it's a viable project, and we meet milestones, and there's going to be conditions in there. It's not just when we tell you we want it, you have to give it to us. We have to perform. And that's what
It's not lost on me. I get that.
Pardon me?
I get that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Mr. Leash, if I can ask, so is it your understanding that everything outside of the things that you feel that you can't provide without an MOU or a DDA has been provided to Leland at this point that it's been asked for?
Yeah, there's two things that, the equity piece that, again, I explained to the Leland, which was kind of the chicken and egg. We need an agreement in order.
Right.
And Mr. Timmons had mentioned it as well, as the DDA is paramount to going to the next steps,
Right.
to have an investor say, okay, we're gonna write a term sheet with you, we're gonna commit $500,000 or $2.3
Right,
million.
then that's what I'm saying. Besides those things that you are not able to reach because you don't have what you need from us, has everything else, is it your thought that everything else has been provided that's been asked for?
Yeah, the only two things is that equity piece and the Boley report.
Okay, and then, can I ask, sorry, one more question. There were a couple of items that are either near dated, and I think you addressed one with the hotel provider, but there are a couple of other items that are either nearly out of date or close to it. Is there any, I think that certainly could be cause for concern, and you addressed the one in regards to the hotel provider. Is there any other assurances from some of the other non-financial institution parties that you could provide that might apply, how that timeline might be extended to give comfort that this process may not end in the next 30 days, and yet those may expire in 30 days?
I believe that all of my commitments, Hilton is
Right.
a rolling commitment.
Right.
Live Oak and Premier Capital stand ready to move forward. American United is ready to move forward. I mean, those are really the key.
Right, but going about like the property itself and.
The properties, we've got an agreement for an acquisition that I need to move on. That information was provided, and it appeared, I had a conference call or I spoke with Leland today, and they didn't know about the property acquisition, which was in part of the documents that we had supplied, which is kind of a big deal. It's
Sure.
a portion of what we're doing.
Sure, having ownership would be important.
So those are all, I mean, I got a 23-year lease, and agreement, so I'm not too worried about that.
Thank you.
So the letter of commitment from Live Oak Bank has been provided to Leland, or you're saying that they will not
So the
provide
rest of
one?
the pages are, so this page, so Premier Capital is the broker that works with Live Oak and with us. So they've brought all of us together, and so they are kind of the gatekeeper of that. And there's a couple of more pages that go with the live oak deal sizing that I didn't include because I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with tons of paper, and it's all been uploaded anyway. So
But don't you think that's important for us?
it's been uploaded. I'm sure that you would have seen it or had access to it through the consultant. I didn't want to overwhelm you because this kind of speaks to the letter that I provided them. And so, I mean, I can get the rest of it if that was of interest. It just lays out the budget. It lays out the budget, each of the cost elements, similar to our construction budget, except it has all soft costs, everything in it, and it adds up to $26.5 million.
Well, that's another increase.
25.6 million, sorry.
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
There were some other people that were going to, wanted to address.
Oh,
Yes, is there someone else?
Sorry. Robin Miles, 1516 East 10th Street, Dallas. I've spoke up many times here before regarding this project, and I've sat behind your desk, and Mr. Scott Baker said, well, there's other people that may be in line for this. I heard that 7 years ago when I was on this board, that somebody else may want this property, and I haven't seen anything ever happen with that property. I think as an agency, as an urban renewal agency, what do we owe our taxpayers? What are we to do? What is your mission statement? What is your mission statement to do? We were to provide businesses, help businesses. As people come to Michael Leash and say, how can we help you? How can we help you move forward with this fantastic project of 120 jobs? That's what I see as a business owner being downtown. And all of us business owners sitting in here today, we've stood here time after time after time. We want 120 jobs. What does the agency do to hold his hand and say, how can we help you? Sounds like Leland, wow, sound like Leland probably needs to lose their job. Or, I mean, I hate to say that, but that's not dollars well spent. Mr. Leash is a financial expert in his field of what he does. I work with him on a daily basis of properties that he funds in the banking industry, and he's spot on for everything that he does. He knows underwriting, he knows paperwork, he knows how to upload it, he knows what needs to be done. And I think the board needs to address 61 days. 61 days. Somebody needs to say to Mr. Leash, we're sorry. Leland made a mistake or something here. I'm appalled by the amount of work that he's done that somebody didn't get documents. I would just like to say, look at what your mission statement is for the people of our town. This is what we are taxed for. We are taxed to create. We haven't had a project of this magnitude in a long time. Let's let it go. Let's run with it. What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? It can fall through, and we can move on to the next person. So, like I said, I want to see a hotel down here. I want to see the streets filled. I want to see rental space that he may have. I may even rent a space. I just say, slow down. Everybody just kind of slow down and what's our hurry? What's our hurry? That's it.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. So, is there going to be a motion, or,
I make a motion, we move to decline the extension to the exclusive negotiating agreement between Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD LLC.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to decline the extension to the exclusive negotiating agreement, ENA, between the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So opposed, there's Baker, Howard, Ron Curtis, and this one. Thank you.
I move that we approve the 120-day extension for GBHD and instruct staff to work quickly to develop the DDA.
Is there a second? Okay, for a lack of a second,
I'll second it so we can continue the dis-
okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the extension of the ENA between Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD for the requested 120-day period.
Some discussion.
Discussion?
I think that, I asked if we could go back into executive session, because I think that there's still maybe some new things that come to light that we could chew through. I'd feel more comfortable voting either way if we had a chance, but if that's not an option, we did have some other alternatives between all or nothing, 120 days or not. We can, we could extend it for an additional amount of time. We could extend it, to get additional information, or we could extend it contingent upon reimbursement of costs associated with this. We invested in a substantial amount. I think that shows the board's support of this project. I'm going to talk to a board member that hasn't liked this project. It's the viability question and the fact that we spent a lot of time and money on this project, as evidenced by our time here tonight. So, that said, I'd like, all due respect to your motion, I think that maybe we can find some middle ground and, do 30 or 60 days, or talk about, some people have a sticking point with the funds. Myself, I'd like to consider a motion that has some of that reimbursement piece added in, as staff suggested to Mr. Leash in his letter. The wording there worked for me.
Except that our motion previously was to offer 2 120-day extensions, and so unless we have a really good reason not to extend it, I feel like we are obligated by that vote to extend it so we can get this worked out.
I guess to expound on what you're doing with the reimbursement scenario, I guess that's where I was going with the parking lot scenario. It seemed like the land was the most important part of Mr. Leash's deal, and maybe I misunderstood that, but I was thinking that would be something that we could have some sort of an agreement based on the land, so that you can continue moving forward without this body having to commit the funds and come back to us when you then have the funds.
Yeah, I took our vote earlier, it was not a vote against the project, as you said. It was like
No.
the project, just a little bit early, come back when you're a little bit farther down the road. And I get the chicken thing, but it's hard for a public agency to be the first one in. And so.
We're just asking for the same development and disposition agreement. It's just like Tocola, and Tocola got all those things written in there, so why wouldn't you do that for Mr. Leash? You just put the conditions on it so that he has to meet those, and he's not even asking for cash, he's asking for the parking lot and some waiver of fees, and none of that happens until he's well into having all his financing and starting building.
I agree with Mr. Scott that we need to have a little more time to discuss this further, and if we voted right now, I couldn't agree to extend it based on those, that I'd want to have some more talk about that. And to keep comparing, I mean, I think it's something we're taking this project, looking at this project right now.
And most of us weren't here for Tocola, and so, you know, I value your experience through that, but every project is different, and for the reasons that we talked about.
But not the process of ENA to DDA. That shouldn't be different.
Well, we don't have much time because this 120 days is done October 24th. So we either do something now or we have a special meeting before October 24th.
Well, they already pointed out that we held on to some stuff for 60 days, so, I mean, I feel like we should
That's a fair point.
work on this.
So there's a motion on the floor.
There is a motion. Any more discussion? Okay, it's, I call for the vote. All those in favor?
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Yes, it was me.
Okay.
All those in favor of the approval of the extension, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Me.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a staff comments.
Yes, I'm somewhat confused because there was a motion, I think, that was to deny the extension, which didn't succeed because it was a 4-4 vote. And then the motion to approve an extension, which didn't pass too, so I'm not sure that you've
So-
actually made a decision at this.
No, we just made,
They did nothing.
at the end of the 120 days,
It's just
done.
Well, I don't think that was the motion that you, was defeated was to approve. I don't think you actually had a motion to, your first motion was to terminate, not extend it, to have it terminated, and that motion didn't.
They're just gonna let this one run out.
But I kind of got the idea from talking to Scott that I was under the impression that this wasn't done as far as the discussion.
right.
Yeah.
Tonight with potential other days or, you know, I understand.
Yeah, I was thinking of making an alternate motion for less time, and I guess I still hadn't had the answer to the question of whether we could or could not go back into executive session. It's not on the agenda. If we need to add it to the agenda, we got a little out of order, but I thought I thought this group would benefit from going back and doing a short executive session. So I think it's a question for you.
Well, the board can do that. You have to announce the purpose of the executive session. You can go into an executive session and come out.
Tonight?
Yeah.
I'd
I mean,
rather-
is that or a special
I'd
meeting?
rather do that than come back. I mean, I'm here.
I agree.
Short.
Short.
Just,
Well-
it feels like we're close to a compromise or a better solution than what we have tonight. But I feel like it needs some discussion, perhaps.
Maybe Paula can read, I guess, both motions, because as I understood the effect of them, it basically wasn't to make an actual decision about whether the ENA was not going to be extended or if it was going to be extended. Maybe I'm confused.
John has his, don't you? Do you have yours?
What are you looking for?
Your motion.
The original motion I made was Steve's recommendation to terminate the agreement.
Right,
That was the original motion.
right,
The
Not to
original motion was
extend.
to deny the extension request.
Right.
right.
That was my original one. Then we went into discussion.
No, then,
We moved to vacate it.
Dennis moved to approve and instruct staff to prepare a
second for discussion.
So I think we're still going back to the original
There was
motion.
no second for discussion, no, he just said he would like to return to the discussion, and so they did.
After a second, there's automatically discussion.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So then there was a vote. Darcy Long Curtis was in favor, all others were opposed. And that was for the last motion. And then there was some muddled words. And then it was suggested that we return to executive session. If we return to executive session, I won't be able to live stream when we come back to the open session, but we could record it.
So what was the motion that board member Dawn Curtis made? That was for the DDA.
We moved to approve the extension and instruct staff to prepare a DDA.
And that motion, there was a vote taken.
There, Stacy seconded it, and then we went into discussion, and then there was a vote. Darcy Long Curtis was in favor, all others were opposed.
That motion failed.
Correct.
So,
I mean, in essence, an approval or a denial of the extension is the same motion. You don't believe so?
I don't think they are. I think they are separate motions. That's where, what my concern is,
Okay.
that they actually were different motions. And so I think posture now is that the ENA is still in effect, but we haven't decided about the extension of this.
Yes,
Point of clarification,
yes.
if I understand the situation right now, there were 4 votes. There was a vote that John made, and then there was a vote to rescind that, or re-examine it. Then there was a vote, and it didn't pass either to terminate. Then there was a vote to extend, and that didn't pass. So there were 4 motions. If I understand it now, help me out here, if you do nothing, the agreement ends on the 24th.
That's my, that's my,
Block of veto.
right,
Right.
right, exactly.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding as well.
Yes. So,
So the challenge with going into an executive session to have a few discussion items clarified is,
There's really no reason to have one. There's no one
There's
here,
nobody
right?
here.
I mean,
Well,
we're not-
It's on
the
there.
only reason would be
To not have it in the minutes.
some discussion among the board that I suppose would maybe lead to another motion coming out back in the
Right.
regular session that would
Okay.
be a different motion than what's been considered.
If I might add, you just opening yourself up to more lack of input to the executive session.
sure,
And you're
good point,
creating a situation that's a no-win.
sure, good point.
I need you to identify yourself.
My name is Jose Jimenez.
thanks, Al.
I'm sorry, I really don't know who you are.
You are who?
Paul Webb?
I'm Al Wynn, W-Y-N-N, 1709 Cherry Heights Road, Dalles, Oregon.
Thank you.
He's like that to everyone.
Yes.
Are you saying I'm not special?
No, but not in this case. Okay, so. The only,
The difference is if you go in executive session, you can't report.
Sure,
right,
yeah, I understand.
Or minutes. Yeah, it's, and mostly
But I don't
it was,
think
it was to ask staff some questions about some of these
I'm gonna go to
documents.
the bathroom.
Right, the
So
timing.
I didn't hear anything that,
That's the practical effect.
I didn't hear anything at any time that showed that
And then if it's not,
Mr. Harris made any false statements or at all, but,
terminate.
yeah, it's tough.
So,
because I think it says.
does anybody else
it
want
has
to go
be
into
maybe
executive
extended
session?
by approval of the board.
I mean, I can discuss
I don't.
And
right
discuss
here.
it here, it's
We can
fine.
discuss it in open
fine.
session.
I don't have any trouble discussing.
I wanted to give staff a chance to speak
Okay.
freely,
See, I-
and that was the point of
Right.
that, but if that's not necessary, then.
I agree with Tanner on that, and I kind of was trying to get that same line of thought is, if we give out a commitment letter, can it move forward? Because I'm thinking it's still a good project if we can get some commitment kind of going with that, so,
Nobody's disagreeing on the
yeah,
project.
exactly.
It's just that the developer is tying Urban Renewal's hands. In my perspective, he's tying our hands. We want a commitment in order for the project to move on. We want a commitment, we want commitments shown from the investors. And at this point, there are no commitments. There's interest. And nobody, I mean, I believe that it's a good project. It's just the way that it's going to take some time, and Mr. Leash is not a developer.
I mean, my whole thought with that parking lot is if he can come in and work out an agreement with that parking lot to keep the ball rolling, I'm all for that. It doesn't seem to be a sought-after piece of property that we've had any applicants for or anything of that nature. And again, yes, I think it's a great project. I'd love to see it happen, but I'd like to see the puzzles pieces first.
Well, and I think that also gives him an opportunity, as opposed to saying right now, today, it's $1 million that he needs in addition to the parking lot, or some combination of SDCs or whatever. But it gives him an opportunity to kind of put all those pieces back together with somewhat firm commitments, as firm as he can get at that time, and then really see what that delta or what that missing component is. Assuming it's $1 million or whatever the total is, then, represent that information at that point in time. I'm concerned, I'm saddened by this process. I've been disappointed the whole way along. It is, I'll be honest, it's felt challenging, to say the least. It's felt like we were caught in the middle, and I don't like that feeling. It's hard to hear different pieces of information coming at you from different sides, and it's been really difficult to sort through what is, what version and where everything fits in, and I think that, to me, is saddening. I think we all agree, I think we all agree that it's a great opportunity for this community. 120-plus jobs is fantastic. Property tax revenue is fantastic. I think there are a lot of us that, have heard concerns from folks that we deal with in the community, and tried to offer assistance any way we can. So I think the frustration of we're not doing anything to help is frustrating, because I think all of us sitting in this room have done a lot to help. And I guess I just would like to see us make sure we have all of the information, then make an educated decision, and with all of the information and all the pieces at one point in time. And I don't want to lose, I don't want to find ourselves in a situation that we are in today with the recreation or the Granada. That none of us do. But I don't think we're there with this project. I think there's enough safety valves that is not an issue. So.
How could that happen, though? I mean, he's not asking for a building. He's already
I agree.
owns that land. I mean, if it doesn't work out, we get the parking lot back. And maybe if you got far enough, we're out some SDC fees, if you got far enough.
Right.
No, it's
So,
Very valid, very valid. I think there are some issues with the, and I think the point got missed, and Mr. Baker missed that, but, you know, it's not just the opportunity of that or that parking lot, it's our time and our resources and staff energy. You know, obviously, finding a way to expedite this process to whatever conclusion is necessary is got to be important. And, you know, I think my first question along the way was, gosh, if I was receiving emails saying I didn't get, I'm sending, you're supposed to be getting information and I didn't get them, my first thing would have, I mean, we deal with Dropbox all the time, and you pick up the phone and you go, I can't find it. You know, I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask. And so I agree with you. I agree with you.
What she said, but Darcy, it is, unless I'm reading, and I would love to read this wrong, I'm seeing $103,000 parking lot, $172,000 that the Urban Renewal Agency will pay the city.
Right.
$100,000 demolition grant, which is cash out, and then $625,000 of other development costs as cash out. Right,
Okay,
so it's
forgot
not.
about the demolition
And-
grant, but
and
if he
six-
doesn't build, he has to pay it back.
He does, right,
Right.
and, but we're saying, we are gonna give, it's I think I agree, I think the parking lot, well, I don't know if the parking lot's worth $103,000. I just know that we don't have an appraisal, but 625, 700, I mean, it's $900,000 close to of actual cash, not just waived SDCs and things, so it is, it's a lot of money, anyway.
What is cash?
Was that, it's all cash, I mean, it's cash.
All the money out of urban renewal less the parking lot, we
It's-
just put a dollar amount on, is what he's saying.
900,000,
Because we have to pay the SDCs.
Yeah,
yes.
city's not going to eat that, right?
And $625,000 of
Yeah,
undefined,
whatever it is.
just contribution to,
Right, but my argument is that the usual procedure that we've used with everybody else is this is where we write that into the DDA. And I don't understand why we're not writing the DDA so that he can meet those deadlines. When we put all these other things up front, he's
Sure.
just said that he's done everything he can
Right.
without the DDA. And now we're refusing to give him the DDA because we're saying he hasn't provided us enough information.
and I think that's a fair point.
Like, well, I thought I had someone to grasp on, obviously I didn't. The extension, the basic point tonight of this was whether or not to extend the ENA an additional 120 days, correct?
Yes.
If, I'm just gonna play a what if that had been, if it was extended, or if it's extended for any amount, what does that commit the agency to?
Working in good faith towards development of a
Right, so
DD.
we'd have more costs with,
Staff
legal
time.
and stuff like that to try to, I mean, that's my question. I understand all the parking and the cash out and how the DEA, I'm trying to grasp about all this time we spent for what the true effect of extending or not extending an ENA is.
Well, the lawyer said he was willing to negotiate paying for that.
Okay.
And we also could make it somewhere farther down the line for them to finish up, you know, so that other milestones are met.
I probably should.
You know what,
And I think that's
But
why.
I wanna know, I don't understand.
what my problem is when Leland gave their presentation, and they said that anybody else that was building this type of project that they've worked with wants community support, and they don't hide behind secretive agreements, and that said a whole lot to me.
I think.
I wasn't
You weren't
present for that.
Yeah,
And that sounds like some other people weren't here, and I understand that. I'm just asking a question about the process.
I can see why he would want to protect his plan so that nobody else could take it and go build another hotel in town before he could. I mean, I think that's reasonable. That's why we're doing everything in executive session, to keep it private until we've said go forward.
And I
Some of that
think
stuff
we,
should
and I
never
think
be
we
out
do
in the
entirely
public.
too much in executive session.
I've worked for 3 different developers. And I've never seen a confidentiality agreement for any project.
Because were they doing public stuff that was out and discussed in
Sure,
public
you
ways?
bet. You bet.
So,
So
so how about an extension that has staff move forward, but save future phases of Leland's stuff for later? Let us look at everything that's in the Dropbox and whatnot, or maybe not everything, but I maybe just try and, it will give us time to perhaps digest, so that we're not spending a lot of more money on this.
don't
I mean, I
we
think
should
the
spend
whole,
anymore.
the
Yeah.
whole idea though of us hiring the consultant was to let the professionals dig
Yeah.
through all that without any biased opinions.
Mhm.
And then it kept our liability out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
But then, now we have Mr. Timmons sending us a letter saying that he thinks that there is bias.
Yes,
and,
disparaging.
I mean,
remarks.
and he's accusing, and I mean, we don't work for Leland. We ask staff to do a job, and they're not easy jobs.
Well, if we want the letters from the bank, then we need to do some kind of DDA and put the conditions in that, that at least he can go get that and bring it back to us. Everything else could be contingent on that. And if he doesn't do that, then your DDA is over. Because that's what we're saying we don't have, and he's offering to get it for us, he just needs a DDA.
But when I asked him the question about Premier Capital, and I said, do you have a letter like this from Live Oak Bank? He said he has other papers. And I asked him again, and he said he has other papers, didn't want to inundate us with too much information, but he never answered the question.
I don't think he understood the question. Premier Capital goes through, this Live Oak. So like Premier Capital can go through many different
Like
funders.
like a
This is
mortgage.
just the one that they have chosen to do with him. And he said he would get us the extra pages if we wanted it. So I don't think there's any secret there.
The letter he has here from Hilton says the plan submitted, site plan application appears to work. Doesn't say it works. Premier Capital, interest in debt financing. It doesn't say, there's no commitment.
Right, but I think he addressed,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think we can get that down the road.
I think, let's ask him if he's interested in locking up the land and see if he's interested in, putting all the capital together before he comes in and he asks for money.
When he starts digging the hole, then he can come back to us for money.
Are we gonna build this hotel for this town? We know it's good. We've seen how much money it's gonna bring with increased property taxes and jobs. Or are we gonna just keep going over and over this because some people don't like Michael Leash? And I think that somebody's pulling the strings on the back end of this, and I'm really frustrated.
Who said they don't like Michael Leash?
Oh, several times on record.
On record.
Yes, you can go back and listen. But my point is, I'm saying, don't have to give him everything, just get him the DDA so he can go get a piece of it. I mean, that's the whole point of writing a DDA. It's exactly what we did with Tocola. It's exactly what we do with everybody else. We outline, I have it up on my computer if you want. We outline their steps and we say you have to do this or it's over. We can write it to protect ourselves.
I also, sorry, we keep bringing up past projects, and I think that, I'm hoping that we can learn from past projects. And part of that learning is that Tocola, everybody, both sides, everything wanted to work. If some bully thing kills it, so much staff time and has been invested in that project and energy.
And a building.
What I'd like to see is this agency move to more of a reimbursement model where the planning piece is paid for by the developer. And so we can learn from these mistakes and say, wow, we invested a ton of time and energy in these projects. And I
And buildings.
And
Sorry,
buildings.
I'm
Yeah, well, I
interrupting,
mean,
but
that's
multiple
the
buildings.
Hotel development, I'm just talking about, you know,
Yeah.
the example that she's bringing
Right.
up. You know, and maybe a better example is other projects like the Granada block, you know? And so, since it seems to be also a hotel, also with the same developer. But, so I think it's reasonable to expect developers, and this one is maybe the one that we start, and we learn from our mistakes and go forward by asking them to pay those costs of getting us a certain way down the road before we start committing money. We'll have more money for future projects as a result. We'll have more time and energy, and it will also make sure that, my belief is when you're paying those planners by the hour to review your documents, you come with a better application. You come with better documents because you are paying those costs. And we're at a time now where, we're at a decision point. We've expended a lot of money. We could have, woulda, coulda, shoulda that all night, but saying, what are we gonna do going forward? And my thing is well, I'm okay with it if they're footing the bill. If it frees up, allows us to hire an associate planner or farm it out or something because we're getting X number of dollars an hour. In a $25 million project, I think that the burden should be on the developer and not the agency.
And it
That goes
also
in the
gets some
DDA.
skin in the game on
Yeah,
there, and
the
a
DDA.
little
For
bit
con-
of skin
for-
in the game for
Yeah,
their
they got
part.
some more skin in the game for drafting the DDA. If we're gonna ask Gene and
I'm saying
Mr. Parker-
in the DDA, you could make them responsible for paying for it now. He said he was willing to consider
to
it.
negotiate it, yeah,
He
exactly.
didn't
So-
say that, actually. The attorney said that he couldn't say for sure, but he
Right.
thinks it could be worked out, so.
They would try and
I'm just,
negotiate it,
that's
but
specifically what was said
Right,
tonight.
but the next
It
thing is
doesn't-
to negotiate the DDA.
it's a long way from saying, oh yeah, we're willing to take on those costs or even cost share. However, so, maybe a way, if the board is comfortable, is to say, we are gonna approve the extension, provided that you pay for the cost of developing a DDA from here. And that would include, I would think, an appraisal of the parking lot and an hourly rate for staff time.
So the only reason we need a value for the parking lot is so that he can get up to the financial number that he needs. So why do we need to pay for an appraisal of the parking lot?
Because I just think that, given everything, the history of the hotel project, maximum transparency, I don't want to have to stop on the street and say, how did you come up with that number? I'd like to say, oh, it had a yellow book appraisal at this. And so this is how we value it, not a value that he created, but an independent value.
That's just due diligence.
That's a normal transaction for any real estate.
It seems reasonable.
Yes.
And,
I'm just saying it doesn't matter to us if it comes back 103 or.
it changes the amount of potential cash. It does matter, because if it comes back 200,000 as a value, then that 625 of just other development costs gets adjusted. Or goes up, and our contribution then goes up. So it does change that bottom line, and it changes the stack, so.
As we discussed about with the recreation, what's the value of the dirt? The value of the
Yeah.
dirt was 300,000.
Okay. Any decision going to be made here, or are we?
Well, again, I guess my concerns, I think, are somewhat now in this gray area where there was the one motion made, and we had a motion to reconsider, and I don't know that you've actually made a final determination about that reconsideration, whether you're in fact going to.
It sunsets on the 24th.
Well, I guess we'll get into that argument. I don't know whether Mr. Leash or his attorney will argue that since there wasn't any definitive action, the agreement continued, although the agreement clearly says it needs to be approved by the board for an extension. If there's no approval, then we'd probably say it terminates. But I would prefer that it's a clear action on the part of the agency, either it's approved or it's not.
how would we feel about, what's our opportunity, Mr. Parker, to let this one expire, but prior to it expiring, send them a new ENA with some of the provisions that we discussed. So we are gonna let this ENA expire.
I think what he's asking for is he still wants another motion to, you would want a motion to deny the.
Well, either
'Cause
way,
we-
I mean, that was the issue that was
Right.
here tonight. And
Right.
it's-
It'd be nice if this didn't, you know, if we could, so the ENA, anyway, speaking for myself, I'd be comfortable with offering him a new, saying, yeah, your ENA is gonna expire on the 24th. We have a new ENA for you. You can, for the board's part, it's been pre-approved. If you wanna sign it, you get a new ENA for 120 day.
It doesn't have to be 120 days.
Doesn't have to be, but but we let this one expire, we draft a new ENA that has a provision that they're gonna cover, the cost of developing the DDA. And I feel, and also that they're gonna pay for an appraisal for a couple $100, but they're gonna pay for appraisal, and then we also direct staff to, and then we'll see what they do, they either want to take on those costs, or they don't. But either way, it seems like the will of the board is to allow it to expire.
Is there any difference in just encouraging them to bring back a different proposal that, with some of the guidelines that we've outlined in this discussion?
I think it will feel like more support for their project.
Can you make a motion for that?
I think Mr. Parker seems concerned about, and I think we've had this issue come up maybe 4 meetings ago or something where we had to work through the reconsideration. And is that the issue, is that we voted to reconsider, but then we never
Right.
reconsidered, right?
That's one of
That's
my-
what you're saying?
Yeah, that's one of my.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
So basically,
Yeah.
basically, you
I just
need,
want to keep us legal.
basically, you need a motion
to go back
to
and,
go back.
right?
To vote on the
So
same.
I make a motion to decline the extension of the executive negotiated agreement between Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency and GBHD LLC. Is that what you're looking for?
I've got to think about this because that motion basically failed because there wasn't enough to pass it. So I think I don't know, I think you would maybe have to have a motion to reconsider that motion, if I recall right.
But the vote that we reconsidered passed, it was 7-1 or whatever the count is. So that was the vote which was to, right, that was Tanner's original, sorry, and I said it was you, but it was actually Mr. Elliott's, or that was the one we reconsidered, right?
And that was unanimous.
And
I
it
made
was,
the motion to
oh, was that you?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, but I mean, it was Mr. Elliott's original motion that we reconsidered.
And then the second motion was to agree to extend.
Right. But-
And then that's where we didn't pass because we needed discussion, as Scott brought up, to come up with something, a compromise instead of
Right.
agreeing to the way it was.
But I think what Mr. Parker, if I understand what he's thinking, was that we never went back and because when you reconsider, you have to go back and actually finalize what you're reconsidering. Is that what you're,
I believe that's the intent of a motion
to reconsider, is that we should have gone back to Tanner's original as opposed to, is that right?
Changing the
You're far more,
I thought we did.
I'm not a huge,
I feel that we did that, but.
We did.
We did that.
So, as you work through the, kind of the housekeeping, the question is still, can we get there with a motion, or how would we, I'm seeing some head nodding, it's getting late, to, what's the best path forward? Either, do we need, because I'm not sure we can extend this with amendments. Or my question is, can we extend it with amendments, or should we just allow this ENA to expire and write a new
I would be
ENA?
concerned about that because I think that probably what was contemplated by an extension was that it would be on the terms that were in the ENA, and I think if
Right.
we start
Original.
So we
adding
just, I think like, right,
terms that
if
are
we
not
do
there,
nothing,
I
it
think that
expires, right?
complicate matters.
So let's just let that one expire. maybe direct staff to write a new ENA with the provisions that we've discussed here tonight.
But
If it's okay, if it's legal, we can allow our wonderful chair to just sign our half, or we've review it, provided that it reflects our discussion, sign it, kick it over to them, ball's in their court. They want the extension, they agree to the provisions. They don't want the extension, well, it was, we kind of voted to.
Maybe not an extension, but a new.
Or new ENA, yeah, they either agree to the new ENA.
With what we've discussed.
With what we
tonight.
discussed with the, or they don't. But either way, we would say, well, we did give you a new ENA for 120 days. You didn't like the terms.
Pick the number of days, yeah.
Come back to us with something different, or come back to us when you're more ready. We're not going anywhere. Love the project. Hope it works. Best of luck. See you soon, hopefully, with some signed letters and more things.
I don't really think that's negotiating in good faith, because they've met all the conditions, they provided all the documents, and now we're trying to force them into doing something that's more in our favor, when we already approved 2 120-day extensions to get this worked out. So
We didn't approve 2 120 days. We approved that we
Can be
could look at
opted to
extra
could,
120 days, so.
okay, but I'm just saying it's not in good faith if there's really no reason to end the negotiation.
I don't think they've really proven that they have the financing.
Right.
No.
I think that's the deal, is they didn't provide the documents that
They
we know
provided
of.
what they could, right? And they said everything but the finance, which if we give them the DDA, they will bring the letters that we want back.
I think the missing piece for this whole project is that confidentiality scenario where we can't get everything that the consultant is requesting. We don't get to see that. How do we make it?
Is that what you negotiated, the final? Because I don't even know what your final confidentiality agreement was.
No, it provided that information could be authorized both to staff and to the members of the board. We did not include a condition that it could not be provided to the agency members.
That was their original proposal, is that document exchange would be between GBH and Leland.
And staff and agency wouldn't.
And Leland would not enter into that agreement. They
Sure.
weren't comfortable.
And
I would've been uncomfortable.
point of clarification, to what Darcy just said, we should be negotiating in our favor, not his favor. We're looking out for taxpayer money here.
But when
on
you're
the
doing
taxpayer
an ENA,
favor.
that says you're going to negotiate in good faith. And we
And we
agreed
should
to
be
something.
negotiating in the good faith of the taxpayer, not in the good faith of whoever we're negotiating with.
We're supposed to get rid of blight and increase the tax value of downtown.
And none of us disagree with that.
Right. So I could be, yeah, I could get, I hear what you're saying. I understand it, but I think in an effort to try to keep this moving and try to, there are differences. I mean, there are differences, and I'll be the first to say, Mr. Leach just told me there are differences, that he knows he's not a developer. He's got great folks underneath him that are willing to help with the pieces that he's not an expert in. I think it does feel different. And so I think we're just being cautious, and in that effort, I could support, taking a look at this again and something along the lines of what Mr. Baker said, and ensuring if that's what it takes to get the commitment portion of the funding and all of that in line to make us all feel comfortable, I could support that.
Okay. We've got to do something,
Yeah.
because we got to move on. We're getting mired down.
Yep.
Suggestions, motion?
So, Mr. Parker, does it work if we make a motion to, do we need to make a motion to direct staff to create a new ENA? Or,
That could be, I guess, because at this point, it would appear that since, in effect, your motion to reconsider didn't really pass, so that would probably mean the original motion would come back into effect, which was to decline the extension, so that would have the effect of terminating the ENA, so you could direct us, I guess, to prepare a new ENA to offer to GBHD.
and is that enough, or do you need a motion? Would you like that in the form of?
I think at this point, you would need a motion, because that would be different than the three alternatives that were recommended in the staff report. And now it appears that your original motion to decline is now becoming effective.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that we, that staff prepare a new exclusive negotiating agreement with GBHD to develop a DDA, provided that they reimburse the costs of development of said DDA, including an appraisal of the lot. And an hourly rate for staff time, and for a term of 120 days.
Question, if I may, or should we wait till there's a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
If I may, we're referring to reimbursement of costs. Quite frankly, this is the only agency that I've ever worked for where there have been no reimbursement agreements with developers. This is an extremely unusual.
Right.
It's very generous of the agency and the city in that regard. So reimbursement of costs. Now, are you also, Mr. Baker, considering the cost of our consultants?
I was going to address that separately, because I think that I didn't want to muddle the issue, so I thought I was going to do that in a separate motion, or separate direction.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay. Call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, opposed is
I'm ready to go.
Elliot, Frederick, Curtis, thank you, sorry folks.
It's opposed.
Okay. You had something else?
Well, it's
Doesn't
kind of
matter.
contingent upon the
Doesn't
first one. So, all right, so then the current ENA expires, and we have nothing to replace it with unless somebody else wants to make an alternate motion. Sorry, Chair.
What was the vote again?
It didn't pass. 4-4, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, 4-4.
Okay, all right. Can we go back to staff comments in the next regular meeting?
Madam Chair, your next regular meeting is scheduled for November 20th. That is the Thanksgiving week. So the options before the board were one, to hold the meeting on that date, or perhaps consider another date. We don't have anything critical scheduled. As part of the Granada Theater DDA, Mr. Gomez submitted a list of improvements and the costs associated with that. This is a periodic update. So we do have that, but I could just distribute that to the board. This is a matter of correspondence and not have an open meeting item. That and one or two other minor presentations are tentatively scheduled, but other than that, there's no pending business at this particular time.
Do we have any new word on the bully scenario with Tocola?
Where that is initially, the hearing, I think, was scheduled for November,
Last Thursday.
part of November 7th or 10th. The attorney for Tocola indicated he would like more time, so we filed a motion for a continuance and got that motion granted. It's now scheduled for December 3rd. We had a conference call today with Mr. Harris and Mr. Leibs and myself, and Mr. Minor, who's the attorney for Tocola, Mr. Entai, and a gentleman from the Portland Metro Agency who does a lot of agency developments, who will be a witness, I think, for Tocola and the agency in our effort to appeal. We're working now on declaring all the exhibits and preparing our arguments. We'll have that. It's due November 13th. All that information has to be submitted, and then we'll have the hearing on December 3rd. And I don't know how quickly it'll be before we get a response. I would expect it would be a few weeks before we get a written decision. Hopefully it'll come back very soon.
Okay. Board members, do you have any comments or further questions?
I got one question for Mr. Harris. A few meetings ago, we had talked about planning, having a special planning session. Is that still in the works?
Planning session in what regard?
For visioning?
Grant.
I've actually had a call today with our state representative, and we were finalizing the scope of work on this study. And so once that is final, and the way this particular program works, it is, the state actually selects the consultant firm themselves, and then it'll probably take, I'm not sure, probably a couple of more months for them to complete the process, to go through all the contract negotiation, but it's still on track. It's just a slow process.
Thank you. I have one question. So are we meeting on November 20th, or we're deciding to not meet?
I'd like to move it up a week if we could, or push it back a week. I'd like to avoid that week if we possibly can.
I think that's something that I would like to do also.
Try to move it up if we can.
14th is better.
14th?
It's a
We-
Wednesday.
We are looking at conducting,
13th.
I have a meeting on that night.
the recent HB 4006, which was signed into law earlier this year, that speaks to communities that are considered severely rent-burdened communities. And we are scheduling a public meeting. We've got a tentative date of the 13th or the 14th of November. That can be moved if necessary.
Well, we could do the 27th.
Are you suggesting that we do them at the same time?
The public meeting?
Public meeting and our urban renewal?
No, those would be separate.
Okay.
Were you suggesting just not meet in November and move to December?
Well, if we do want to meet on the 13th and 14th, then I can have my staff attend that public meeting if necessary. I can be here.
What were you suggesting earlier, though? You said we didn't have any agenda or anything to speak of?
There's no critical items presently scheduled for that meeting, so you could either cancel it or reschedule it. So.
Does the 27th work?
27th is the last Tuesday of the, does it work for everybody?
I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Mr. Harris, is there a way, given the slowdown in the TOCLA process, do we need to ensure that the building is well-maintained and taken care of in the intervening time?
That's something that our maintenance staff, they're starting to look at the buildings now for the winter, so yes.
I mean, just so that we don't find ourselves with, all I remember is visioning the water rushing out the bowling alley thing onto the street, and I just want to make sure we avoid any of that as best as possible, so I'm assuming that's on somebody, I just want to make sure that's on somebody's radar, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? If not, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you for shepherding this.
That reminds you of a police department, doesn't it?
Not exactly, John. Not exactly, John. Not even close.
The herding part of it.
Oh, the herding? Yes, well, that is, yes.